Welcome to Horror Echoes. Here we share long, calm horror stories, perfect for late nights and quiet listening. If you enjoy peaceful horror stories like this, feel free to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. And before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now get comfortable and let's begin. Story 1: The Town That Locked Its Doors at Sunset. I didn't notice the locks at first. That's the part that bothers me the most when I look back on it now, how something so obvious managed to hide in plain sight. Every house I passed through that town had them. Heavy ones, reinforced, deadbolts stacked on deadbolts. Some doors had chains. Others had sliding steel bars bolted directly into the frame, like the kind you'd expect on a storm shelter or a prison cell. But when you arrive somewhere new, your brain is busy cataloging everything else. The road that brought me in was narrow and cracked, barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass. Trees leaned in close on both sides, their branches forming a loose canopy overhead. My phone lost signal about 10 minutes before I reached the town sign, and the GPS froze shortly after. I remember thinking it was inconvenient, but not unusual. Small towns often sit in dead zones. The sign itself was old, white paint flaking off sun-bleached wood. Welcome to Ridgeway. Population 1,173. Someone had scratched something into the bottom of it, not words, just lines, deep ones like tally marks. I didn't stop to count them. Ridgeway wasn't on my original route. I'd taken a detour after a rock slide closed the main highway, and by the time I realized how far off course I'd gone, the sun was already sinking low enough to stain the sky orange. I needed gas, food, somewhere to sleep. Ridgeway seemed like the answer. The town itself looked ordinary, too ordinary maybe. A single main street, a diner with a faded red awning, a hardware store, a post office, no big box stores, no chain restaurants. The kind of place that felt frozen in time, like it had decided somewhere around the late 90s that progress was optional. There were people out, but fewer than I expected. A man sweeping the sidewalk in front of the hardware store paused when he noticed my car, his broom hovering an inch above the concrete. 2 women standing outside the diner stopped talking mid-sentence. Every pair of eyes followed me as I drove past, slow and careful, pretending not to notice. I told myself they were just curious. Outsiders stand out in places like this. I parked near the diner and stepped out of the car. The air smelled like pine and something metallic underneath it. Blood has a smell, but at the time I didn't recognize it for what it was. I only remember thinking it didn't match the calm, postcard look of the place. Inside the diner, a bell rang when I opened the door. The conversation stopped instantly. Every head turned toward me. For a moment no one spoke, not the waitress behind the counter, not the old men in the corner booth, not the cook visible through the pass-through window. The silence stretched just long enough to feel deliberate, like they were waiting to see what I'd do. "Evening," I said finally, forcing a smile. The waitress recovered first. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp and watchful. She gestured toward a booth with one hand while the other never left the counter. "You passing through?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said, "road closure, just looking for dinner and maybe a place to stay." A flicker of something crossed her face at the words "place to stay." It was gone so fast I almost missed it. "We don't get many travelers," she said carefully, "not this late." I glanced at the window. The sun was already touching the tree line. "Is there a motel nearby?" Another pause. "There's one," she said, "at the edge of town, Ridgeway Inn." The way she said it, flat, rehearsed, made my stomach tighten. I slid into the booth and ordered something simple, burger, coffee. While I waited, I noticed the clock above the counter. It read 6:12 p.m. Every few minutes, someone would glance up at it. At 6:20, the cook disappeared into the back. At 6:25, the old men in the corner booth stood up and left cash on the table without finishing their meals. At 6:30 exactly, the waitress locked the front door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed through the diner, loud and final. No one reacted. No one except me. I started, half rising from my seat. Is everything okay? The waitress met my eyes. For the first time since I'd arrived, her composure cracked just enough for me to see what was underneath. Fear. Sit down, she said quietly, and don't leave until morning. Outside, the street lights flickered on. And somewhere beyond the trees, something howled. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds after the howl. It wasn't loud in the way you'd expect, no dramatic echo, no cinematic reverb. It sounded distant, strained, almost tired, like something calling out because it had to, not because it wanted to. The waitress was the first to move. She walked to the windows and pulled the blinds down with practiced speed, snapping each one into place until the diner was sealed off from the outside world. The cook returned from the back carrying a shotgun. He didn't NT it at anyone. He just rested it against the counter, muzzle angled toward the door. That's not funny, I said, my voice coming out thinner than I intended. What is this, some kind of... Don't, the waitress cut in. Don't joke, don't ask questions, and don't look outside if you hear it again. I stared at her. Hear what again? She hesitated. Then she sighed like someone who just realized a lie wouldn't work anymore. Rule 1, she said. Once the sun goes down, nobody leaves their building, not for any reason. The cook added Rule 2, if someone knocks, you don't answer. My mouth felt dry. What if it's a person? The waitress's eyes dropped to the floor. That's the point, she said. Another sound drifted in from outside, this one closer, a dragging noise, slow, deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across asphalt. Every instinct in my body told me to run, to unlock the door and get back in my car, but no one else moved. They stood there listening, faces pale but controlled. This wasn't panic. It was routine. How long does this last? I asked. Until sunrise, the waitress said, sometimes a little after. I laughed under my breath, a short, disbelieving sound. You expect me to believe something just roams around town every night and everyone's okay with that. The cook finally looked at me. You see the population on the sign when you came in? Yeah. He nodded slowly. It doesn't change. That was when I noticed the smell again, that metallic tang in the air, stronger now, somehow, even through closed windows and locked doors. A sudden knock slammed against the diner entrance. 3 sharp hits. Everyone flinched. Help, a voice called from outside. Please, someone help me. It was a man's voice, young, panicked, close enough that I could picture him standing right on the other side of the door, hands pressed flat against the glass. The waitress swore under her breath. Don't move, she whispered. Are you insane? I hissed back. Someone's out there. The knocking came again, frantic this time. They're coming back. I don't know where to go. I just need somewhere safe. I stood up. Before I could take a single step, the cook racked the shotgun. The sound was deafening in the small diner. Sit, he said, not angry, not threatening, just firm. If you open that door, you won't just get yourself killed. The voice outside broke into sobs. I can see you, it said. I know you're in there. The words crawled under my skin. How does he know? I whispered. The waitress shook her head, because it wants you to think he's real. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds there was nothing but the hum of the lights and the sound of my own breathing. Then something scraped across the glass. Slowly, deliberately, like a fingernail being dragged down a window. I couldn't help it, I looked. The blinds trembled as something pressed against them from the outside, a shape, tall, wrongly proportioned. I could see the outline of a head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were listening. Then it spoke again. But this time the voice was different. It was the waitress's voice. Please, it said softly, unlock the door. The cook fired the shotgun. The blast shattered the silence, spraying wood and glass across the entryway. The blinds fell loose, revealing the street outside. There was nothing there. No man, no creature, no blood. Just the empty road and the street lights flickering like they were struggling to stay awake. No one spoke for a long time after that. Eventually, the waitress poured me another cup of coffee I hadn't asked for. Her hands shook so badly she spilled some on the counter. That's why, she said quietly, that's why we lock the doors. I swallowed hard. What is it? She met my eyes. We don't know what it is. We just know it learns. Learns what? How to sound like someone you trust. The clock on the wall ticked over to 7:00 p.m. Outside something laughed. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just a soft, broken sound like it was practicing. No one slept that night. Not really. We stayed inside the diner with the lights dimmed low, sitting in booths or on the floor behind the counter. The cook kept the shotgun across his lap, finger resting near the trigger, eyes never leaving the door. The waitress paced until her legs gave out, then sat with her back against the wall, staring at nothing. Every so often, the thing outside would pass by again. We could hear it through the walls, slow footsteps, too many joints bending when it moved. Sometimes it would stop right outside the diner and just stand there, breathing, listening, waiting for someone to make a mistake. It never knocked again. It didn't need to. Around midnight, someone screamed. It came from somewhere down the street, a short, sharp cry that cut off abruptly, like a radio being switched off mid-sentence. The waitress squeezed her eyes shut. Not again, she whispered. I looked around at the others. You're telling M. This happens often. The cook nodded once, every few weeks, sometimes more. And you just let people die. He didn't answer. The scream was followed by shouting, a woman's voice this time, frantic and pleading. We heard a door slam, footsteps pounding on pavement, and then nothing. Silence rushed back in, heavier than before. My chest felt tight. We have to do something. The waitress laughed, a brittle sound. That's what he thought too. Oh. She opened her eyes and stared at me. Tommy, lived 2 houses down from the motel, good man, grew up here. What did he do? He went outside, she said it was his sister screaming. I didn't like where this was going. He thought if he just looked, just checked, he could help. We found his shoes in the morning, that's all. The cook stood and walked to the back, returning with a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table toward me. A list. Names, dates, short notes written beside them. Didn't lock door. Followed voice. Looked outside. At the bottom, the most recent entry was dated 2 weeks ago. I felt sick. Why don't you leave? I asked. Pack up, get out during the day. The waitress let out a long breath. Some tried. And they come back, she said, or something wearing them does. A sudden crash echoed from outside, metal hitting pavement, then another, and another, like trash cans being knocked over one by one. The cook swore it's close. The diner lights flickered. That's when the motel sign outside went dark. Ridgway Inn sat at the edge of town, right where I'd planned to spend the night. I could just make out the shape of it through a crack in the blinds. One by one, its windows went black. Someone didn't make it inside, the waitress said. I don't know what possessed me, curiosity, fear, stupidity. I stepped closer to the window. The cook grabbed my arm, don't. But it was too late. I saw movement near the motel entrance, a figure stumbling backward, arms flailing. He tripped, fell hard, and tried to crawl away. Then the streetlight above him went out. The darkness there didn't behave like normal darkness. It moved, folded in on itself, swallowed sound. When the light flickered back on, the man was gone. No blood, no struggle. Just his jacket lying in the road. The waitress turned away. Sunrise, she said, just make it to sunrise. The rest of the night stretched on endlessly. The thing outside grew bolder as the hours passed. It tapped on walls, whispered names. Sometimes it sounded like a child laughing. Other times it sounded like someone praying. Once, just once, it sounded exactly like me. My voice, my tone, saying my name like it had known it forever. At 5:47 a.m., the sound stopped. No footsteps, no breathing, no whispers. The silence felt wrong. At exactly 6:02 a.m., sunlight crept over the treetops. The waitress unlocked the door. The town emerged slowly, doors opening, people stepping out, scanning the streets with hollow eyes. Someone screamed near the motel. They found the man's jacket exactly where I'd seen it. Inside the pocket was his wallet. His ID said he wasn't from Ridgway. I asked what they would do with his body. The cook shook his head. There won't be one. I didn't stay for breakfast. I drove out of Ridgway as fast as I could once the road was clear. When my phone finally regained signal, I didn't feel relief. I felt dread, because my voicemail icon was blinking. There was one new message. The timestamp said it had been left at 3:12 a.m. I played it. My own voice whispered into my ear. Please, it said, unlock the door. Story 2, the town that didn't appear on maps. I found the town by accident. That's always how these things start, isn't it? A wrong turn, a dead phone, a stretch of road you don't remember seeing on the map. If I'd been paying closer attention, maybe I would have noticed the mile markers repeating themselves, or the way the forest on either side never seemed to thin, no matter how long I drove. But I was tired, and rain was coming down hard enough to blur the road into a silver ribbon under my headlights. The gas gauge dipped below empty about 5 minutes before I saw the lights. At first I thought they were reflections, wet leaves catching my beams. Then the trees opened up just a little and the road spilled into a small valley. Houses sat clustered together below, warm yellow windows glowing against the dark. No sign, no welcome marker, just a narrow road descending into a town that shouldn't have been there. I coasted in on fumes and pulled up to the first place that looked remotely public, a general store with a single pump out front. The sign above the door flickered, missing half its letters. Jean al Sto. The pump worked, that alone felt like a miracle. As I filled the tank, I noticed something odd. Every house I could see had its lights on, all of them, not a single dark window anywhere in town. I went inside the store to pay. A bell rang when I opened the door. The man behind the counter looked up slowly, like he'd been expecting me. He was thin, pale, with eyes that didn't quite focus on my face, more like he was looking through me. "You're not from here," he said. "No," I replied, "didn't even know this place existed." He smiled at that, not unkindly, just knowingly. "Most people don't," he said. I paid in cash. He didn't offer a receipt, didn't ask my name, just slid the change across the counter and lined in slightly. "Rule's simple," he said. "If you stay the night, keep your lights on." I frowned. "What?" "All of them," he added, "every room, no exceptions." I laughed, assuming it was a joke. "I'm just passing through." He straightened, the smile vanished. "No one passes through," he said. "I slept in my car that night. Or at least I tried to." Rain hammered the roof, relentless and heavy. The town was quiet, no traffic, no voices, but the light was impossible to ignore. Every house glowed like a lantern, curtains drawn back, lamps blazing, porches lit up like it was a holiday. Around 2 a.m., something changed. One house went dark. Just one. It was across the street from where I'd parked, a small blue place with a sagging porch. The lights inside flickered once, then died completely. The effect was immediate. Every other house in town went silent, not dark, just still, like the place was holding its breath. A door opened. I watched frozen as people stepped out of their homes, not all at once. One by one, men, women, children. They moved toward the dark house, faces blank, walking with slow, deliberate steps. No one spoke. I locked my car doors. The crowd gathered around the blue house, staring up at its black windows. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then something moved inside. The windows bulged outward slightly, as if something massive pressed against them from within. A low sound followed, more vibration than noise. The glass shattered. The people didn't react. They just stood there watching. The thing inside the house pushed its way out through the broken window. I couldn't see it clearly. My mind refused to put it together. Too many angles, too much movement, like shadows folding over each other. It dragged itself into the street. And then the lights came back on. All at once, every bulb in every house flared bright enough to hurt my eyes. The people turned and went back inside. The thing was gone. By morning, the blue house looked abandoned, windows boarded up, door sealed, like it had been empty for years. I left as soon as the rain stopped. Later, when I checked my maps, there was no record of the town, no roads leading to it, no name, nothing. But sometimes, late at night, when I forget to turn off a lamp, I swear I see something move in the dark corners of the room. Waiting for the lights to go out. I didn't mean to break the rule. That's the part that still keeps me awake some nights, how easily it happened, not out of rebellion or disbelief, just exhaustion. I must have slept eventually, because the next thing I remember is waking up to silence. No rain, no wind, no hum of insects, the kind of quiet that feels manufactured. My phone screen glowed, 3:41 a.m. That's when I noticed the light. The dome light inside my car was off. My heart stuttered. I didn't remember turning it off. I always left it on when I slept in the car. Something about not waking up in total darkness made me feel safer. Outside, the town was still glowing, every house lit up just like before, but something about the air felt different now, heavier, expectant. I reached for the switch and flicked the dome light back on. Nothing happened. I tried again, still nothing. A soft click echoed inside the car, followed by a faint buzzing sound, like a dying filament. The moment the car went fully dark, I felt it. Pressure. Not on my chest, not on my skin, on my awareness, like something had suddenly noticed me. I stayed perfectly still. Across the street, a curtain twitched. Then another. Lights in nearby houses began to dim, not fully off, just lowered, like eyes narrowing. I heard footsteps. They weren't rushed, they weren't cautious, they sounded resigned. Doors opened up and down the street. People stepped outside again, their movements slow and synchronized. They didn't look at each other this time. They were looking at me. I locked the doors again, even though I knew it wouldn't matter. The general store clerk's words replayed in my head. If you stay the night, keep your lights on. A man approached my car first, middle-aged, gray hair. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, like he was sleepwalking. You turned it off, he said calmly. I didn't mean to, I whispered through the glass. It was an accident. He nodded, it usually is. Behind him, something moved between the houses. The darkness there was wrong, not just an absence of light, but a presence. It stretched unnaturally, bending around corners, pooling in doorways. You need to come inside, the man said. It can't reach you if you're lit. Then why are you out here? I asked. For the first time, his expression changed. He smiled. Because we already belong to it. The shadow slid closer, and I finally understood. The lights weren't protection. They were payment. Each lit house was an offering, an agreement renewed night after night. As long as the town glowed, the thing fed on the dark spaces between them, the gaps, the places where light failed. And I had just created a new one. The shadow surged forward. The man slammed his hand against my window. Turn it back on. I fumbled desperately, slamming the switch, pounding the dashboard. Sparks flew from beneath the steering wheel. The dome light flickered weakly then. The shadow recoiled. It didn't retreat far, just enough. Enough to wait. The people stepped back in unison, retreating to their homes as the lights brightened again. Curtains closed, doors shut. The man lingered a moment longer. Leave at sunrise, he said, and don't stop. When dawn came, the town looked smaller, duller, like it was running out of something essential. I drove away without looking back. I didn't stop until I reached a highway in a town I recognized, one that appeared on maps with dark houses and broken streetlights. Now I sleep with a lamp on. Always. Because sometimes when the power flickers, I feel that same pressure again. And I know it remembers me. I thought leaving would be the end of it. That once I crossed back onto a highway with signs I recognized and places that showed up on maps, whatever rule that town lived by would lose its grip on me. That rules only work where they're enforced. I was wrong. The first sign came 3 days later. I was back home by then. My apartment felt smaller than I remembered, like the walls had crept inward while I was gone. I blamed the exhaustion, the long drive, the way my body still hadn't caught up to real sleep. Every light in the place was on. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, hallway, even the closet. I didn't remember turning them all on, but I didn't turn them off either. That night I dreamed of the town. Not the streets or the houses, but the space between them, the alleys, the narrow strips of shadow that stretched and twisted, connecting one dark place to another. In the dream, the lights overhead flickered, and every flicker felt like a breath being held. I woke up at 3:41 a.m. The exact same time as before. My bedroom lamp dimmed slightly. Just for a second. I sat bolt upright, heart racing, staring at the corner of the room where the light didn't quite reach. The darkness there seemed thicker than it should have been, layered. I turned on another lamp. The pressure eased. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Streetlights near my apartment went out one by one, not all at once, just enough to create gaps. My neighbors complained about power surges, blown bulbs, flickering fixtures. One night, as I was taking out the trash, a man stopped me in the hallway. "You ever been to a place that doesn't exist?" he asked casually. My blood ran cold. I looked at him. He was pale, tired. His eyes didn't quite focus on my face. I don't know what you mean," I said. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, me neither." The next morning his apartment was empty, door unlocked, lights still on. I started researching then. Forums, obscure message boards, urban legend archives. It took a while, but I found others. People who'd stumbled into towns with rules that didn't make sense. Towns that demanded something small, light, silence, routine in exchange for safety. Most posts ended abruptly, accounts abandoned mid-thread. The few that didn't all shared the same conclusion. You don't escape. You get released. The town lets you go once you've learned the rule, once you've carried it somewhere else, once you've become proof. I realized then why the general store clerk had looked at me the way he did. He hadn't been warning me. He'd been passing something on. That was a year ago. I've moved twice since then. I avoid dead-end roads. I never drive at night if I can help it. My electric bill is obscene. Every room I enter, I turn on a light. Because sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet and a street lamp goes out, I swear I feel it again. That pressure, that awareness. Like something is checking to see if I still remember the rule. And if I ever forget. If I ever let the lights go out completely. I know it won't come from the town. The town doesn't need to. It already followed me home. Story 3, the town with the siren no one was allowed to hear. The siren went off at exactly 11:17 every night. I didn't know that when I first arrived in Greymark. No one bothered to tell me, and even if they had, I'm not sure I would have understood what they meant by it. Greymark sat along the coast, wedged between cliffs and a gray, restless ocean, the kind of town that always smelled faintly of salt and rust. Fishing boats lined the harbor, paint piling, names half scraped away. The locals were polite in the way people get when they're used to strangers passing through but never staying. I was there for a temporary job, 3 weeks helping digitize old municipal records, census data, property deeds, death certificates. The town hall basement was full of them. On my first day, I noticed something odd. Every document stopped abruptly around the same time each night, logs unfinished, notes cut mid-sentence. Even modern files, digital records, had timestamps clustered tightly around 1 hour. 11:16 p.m. Nothing later. When I asked the clerk about it, she smiled thinly. We close early, she said. That early, I asked every department. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Everyone who matters. That night I rented a room above a bait shop near the harbor. The walls were thin, the ocean was loud. I lay awake listening to waves crash against the rocks below, watching the clock on my phone inch closer to midnight. At 11:15 the town changed. Lights went out, not all of them, just enough to dim the streets. Conversations outside faded, doors closed, windows shut. At 11:16 my phone lost signal. At 11:17 the siren began. It wasn't loud. That was the worst part. It was low and distant, like something meant to travel far without drawing attention. A single tone that rose and fell slowly, vibrating through the walls more than the air. It made my teeth ache. My chest felt tight, like I'd forgotten how to breathe properly. I stood up without realizing I was doing it. The sound made sense in a way I couldn't explain. It felt familiar, comforting almost, like a lullaby I'd heard before I learned how to speak. I reached for the window. A sharp knock on the door snapped me out of it. "Don't," a voice hissed. I froze. Another knock, softer this time. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't." I opened the door a crack. A woman stood in the hallway, barefoot, hair pulled back hastily. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "You can hear it, can't you?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "What is it?" She shook her head violently. "Doesn't matter, just don't listen, don't understand it." The siren shifted pitch. My thoughts began to drift again, pulled toward the sound like iron filings to a magnet. The woman grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Focus on me," she said. "Count something, anything." I started counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3. The siren faded at 11:23. The silence afterward was unbearable. "That was close," she said, releasing my arm. "If you'd listened too long, you'd be like them." "Them who?" She glanced toward the window where the faint outlines of people stood in the street below, motionless, faces turned toward the cliffs. "They heard it," she said, "and it heard them back." She left before I could ask anything else. The next day at town hall, I noticed the people. They moved normally, talked normally, worked normally. But every one of them had the same empty look behind their eyes, like something had hollowed them out and left a copy behind. On my desk, someone had left a sticky note. "Don't try to understand the siren. Pretend you didn't notice." That night at 11:17, it came again. And this time it sounded closer. I tried to ignore it. That was the advice after all. Pretend you didn't notice. Go about your day. Don't ask questions. Don't connect dots that clearly wanted to stay separate. But once you know a thing exists, pretending it doesn't becomes its own kind of obsession. The woman from the hallway, her name was Mara, found me the next morning near the docks. She didn't greet me, didn't ask how I'd slept. She just handed me a pair of cheap foam earplugs. "Wear these tonight," she said, "and don't take them out for any reason." I turned them over in my hand. "That's it. That's how you deal with it." Her jaw tightened. "That's how you survive it." I spent the day in the records room again, but I wasn't focused on scanning documents anymore. I was searching, cross-referencing dates, looking for patterns. Every unexplained death in Greymark shared the same detail. Time of death listed as unknown, with a note added later, body discovered at dawn. no cause specified, no autopsies performed. And then there were the disappearances. People who simply stopped existing in the paperwork, no death certificate, no missing persons report, just absence, like someone had erased them carefully, leaving no gaps anyone could question. I found one record that hadn't been fully scrubbed. A maintenance log from the coastal warning system, dated 12 years ago. Siren calibration adjusted, range increased. That night I wore the earplugs. At 11:17, the siren still reached me. Not as sound, but as sensation. A vibration behind my eyes, a pressure in my skull, even blocked, it insisted, like it didn't care about ears, like hearing was just a courtesy. Images flooded my mind, not pictures, concepts, vastness, depth. A presence stretching beneath the ocean and far inland, coiled and patient. The siren wasn't a warning. Andrew. It was a call. I ripped the earplugs out. The sound hit me full force. I understood then why they warned us not to. The siren wasn't noise, it was language. And it was speaking directly to whatever part of the human brain still remembered how to listen. I saw the people in the street again. This time I joined them. We stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes turned toward the cliffs, toward the black water beyond. I felt connected to them in a way I'd never felt connected to anyone before. No fear, no doubt, just belonging. That's when I noticed the differences. Some of the people standing there were wrong. Their movements were slightly delayed, their breathing out of sync. Their eyes reflected the streetlights too brightly. They were listening harder than the rest of us. The siren rose in pitch. One of them stepped forward and walked calmly off the edge of the cliff. No scream, no hesitation. Just surrender. The siren stopped instantly. People blinked, looked around, confused, ashamed. They shuffled back to their homes like sleepwalkers waking up. I stayed where I was. Mara grabbed me from behind and dragged me away from the edge, slapping her hand over my ears. You listened, she said, her voice shaking. You listened too long. What happens now? I asked. She swallowed. Now it knows you can hear it. The next morning I quit my job. Packed my things. I left Greymark before nightfall. But as I drove away, I passed a new road sign being installed near the highway. Coastal warning system testing continues. That night in a town miles inland, I woke at 11:17. No siren. Just a low hum beneath the silence. Like something clearing its throat. I thought distance would help. That if I put enough miles between myself and Greymark, the sound would lose its shape, fade into memory, become something I could explain away as stress, imagination, exhaustion. That's how it works with most things. This wasn't most things. The first night after I left, I woke up at 11:17 p.m. on the dot. My phone lit up as I reached for it. The screen cracked from where I'd dropped it in the motel parking lot earlier that evening. No notifications, no missed calls. Just the time. I lay there in the dark, listening. There was no siren, no sound I could point to and say, that's it. But the hum was there again, deep and low, vibrating through the bed frame, through my bones. It felt less like something I was hearing, and more like something my body was remembering on its own. I turned on the TV. Static filled the screen, hissing softly. When I flipped through channels, every station showed the same thing, an emergency broadcast card frozen mid-scroll. This is a test. The words blurred together as the hum deepened. I turned the TV off. In the days that followed, I started noticing it in other people. Cashiers who paused mid-sentence at exactly 11:17, eyes unfocusing for a second too long. Drivers who slowed near bridges and overpasses, hands loosening on the wheel before snapping back like they'd been burned. News articles popped up in places far from the coast. Man walks into ocean without warning. Multiple missing near cliffs, cause unknown. Officials deny connection to coastal alert systems. I knew better. Greymark hadn't been containing the siren. It had been training people to ignore it. I finally understood the empty looks in the town, the way everyone pretended nothing was wrong. They weren't ignorant. They were practicing. I tracked down Mara's email through an old municipal directory. It took 3 days before she replied. You left, that was the mistake. I wrote back immediately. You told me to leave. Her response came an hour later. We were never supposed to survive. We were supposed to stay. To hear it. To dull it. She explained then. The siren wasn't meant for us, not originally. It was old, older than the town, older than the cliffs, something beneath the water that called out across distances humans weren't meant to measure. Greymark had been built where it was on purpose. A buffer. The people who stayed long enough became filters. Their minds learned how to hear without answering, how to absorb the call without completing it. Those who left carried fragments with them. Like me. Why don't they just shut it off? I typed, hands shaking. The reply came slower this time. Because it's not a machine. And it's learning how to sing without us. That night at 11:17, the hum became a sound again. Not loud, not distant. Clear. I heard it in the pipes, in the wiring, in the rhythm of my own breathing. It didn't need speakers anymore. Didn't need towers or cliffs or oceans. It had learned the shortcut. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't entering. It was rising. Images filled my head, towns like Ridgeway, places that demanded rules to survive. Lights on, doors locked, silence kept. All of them connected. All of them responses to the same thing. I don't know how long I stood there, swaying in my apar. T meant staring at the wall as the sound coaxed and pulled and promised. When it finally stopped, I was on my knees, gasping, nails dug into the carpet. On my phone, a new alert blinked. National Coastal Warning System expansion approved. I don't sleep at night anymore. I stay awake until 11:30, counting breaths, focusing on anything but the quiet, because now I know the truth Greymark lived with every day. It's not the siren that takes you. It's the moment you stop pretending you didn't hear it. Story 4, the town that monitored your dreams. The first thing they asked me when I moved to Halcyon wasn't my name. It wasn't where I was from, or how long I planned to stay, or whether I'd found work yet. It was how well I slept. The woman at the municipal office sat behind a spotless desk, hands folded neatly in front of her. A small device rested beside her keyboard, black, smooth, with a single green light pulsing slowly. On average, she said, not looking up, how many hours of uninterrupted sleep do you get per night? I blinked, I'm sorry. She finally met my eyes. Her expression was pleasant, too pleasant, it's required. I told her the truth, 5 hours, sometimes less. She nodded and typed something into her computer. The green light on the device blinked faster for a moment, then settled. You'll need to report to the sleep center tomorrow morning, she said. Just a baseline assessment. Say what? Routine, she replied. Everyone does it. Halcyon was advertised as a wellness town. Low crime, clean air, quiet streets. The kind of place retirees and remote workers flocked to when cities got too loud too fast. And it was quiet. No traffic at night, no barking dogs, no sirens, just rows of identical houses, evenly spaced streetlights, and a strange sense of stillness that made it feel like time moved differently there. That first night I slept better than I had in years. Deep, heavy, dreamless. When I woke up, there was a message waiting on my phone. Sleep quality, excellent. Dream activity, acceptable. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I hadn't downloaded any app. At the sleep center, they didn't hook me up to machines or wires. They just asked questions. Did you dream? No. The technician smiled. Good. What happens if I do? I asked. Her smile faltered for half a second. Then we review it. That's when I noticed the bulletin board behind her desk. Neatly pinned forms, each labeled with a name, a date, and a status. Compliant. Under review. Escalated. I didn't like the look of that last one. Over the next week, I learned the rules. Everyone wore a wristband at night, supposedly to track sleep cycles. The green light on mine pulsed in time with my heartbeat. If it ever turned red, you were required to report immediately. Dreams were considered data. Harmless ones, colors, vague shapes, nothing memorable, were ignored. But anything vivid, anything emotional, anything involving places you didn't recognize or people you couldn't identify had to be reported. Nightmares are just stress, my neighbor told me one evening as we took out the trash. The town just wants to help. I noticed his wristband was red. 2 days later, his house was empty. The mailbox still full. I tried not to think about it, tried to follow the rules, go to bed at 10, lights out at 11, wake at 6. But the dreams came anyway. They started small. A hallway with no doors. A voice calling my name from behind a wall. A feeling that I was being watched while I slept. The first time my wristband turned red, it vibrated hard enough to wake me. My phone chimed immediately. Report to the sleep center, now. I didn't want to go, but something told me not going would be worse. At the center, they sat me in a white room and asked me to describe the dream in detail. Every sensation, every emotion, they recorded everything. When I finished, the technician nodded and stood. You'll be monitored more closely, she said, for your safety. What happens if I refuse to sleep? I asked. She paused at the door. Then we escalate. That night I tried to stay awake. Coffee, cold showers, loud music. At 2:14 a.m., my wristband vibrated anyway. It turned red. I hadn't been asleep. The next morning, a notice was taped to my door. Sleep deprivation is a violation. Report immediately. That was when I realized the truth. In Halcyon, it wasn't dreams they were monitoring. It was what tried to come through them. The sleep center didn't look like a place where bad things happened. That was the unsettling part. Bright hallways, soft lighting, walls painted in calming shades of blue and green. Posters about mindfulness and healthy rest hung evenly spaced, corners perfectly aligned. Everything about it said care, which made the locked doors harder to ignore. They took my phone at the front desk this time. No explanation, just a polite smile and an open palm. I handed it over without arguing. I'd learned quickly that resistance in Halcyon didn't look dramatic. It looked documented. The technician led me deeper into the building than I'd gone before, past consultation rooms and sleep pods, into a wing I hadn't noticed on my first visit. The air felt heavier there, thicker, like it had been breathed too many times. "This is the review room," she said, opening a door. Inside were rows of chairs facing a large screen. Maybe 20 people sat there already, all wearing wristbands glowing red. Some stared ahead blankly, others whispered quietly to themselves. One man rocked back and forth, eyes squeezed shut. No one looked surprised to see me. I took a seat near the back. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life, displaying a simple label. Dream playback subject 1127. A woman's voice filled the room, calm, familiar. It was mine. I listened as my own words described the hallway dream, the doorless walls, the watching presence. As the recording played, images began to form on the screen, not clear pictures, but impressions, shapes, depth, motion. The hallway stretched farther than it ever had in my mind. The walls bent inward. The voice calling my name echoed from everywhere at once. People in the room gasped. Someone sobbed quietly. I realized then that this wasn't just my dream. Others were seeing it too. The technician stood near the screen, clipboard in hand. "Note the consistency," she said to no one in particular. "Spatial distortion, auditory lure, familiar vocal patterns." The screen changed. Dream playback subject 1092. A different voice, different dream. But the hallway was the same. Same walls, same impossible length, same feeling of being watched. My stomach dropped. One by one, dreams played back, different people, different nights. Same place, same presence. That's when I noticed the pattern on the wristbands. Some glowed red. Others had shifted to a dull amber. And a few, 3 people in the front row, were blinking slowly between red and green. Escalated subjects, the technician explained casually. Their dreams have become receptive. A man in the front row stood up suddenly. "It talks to me now," he said, voice shaking. "It tells me things before I sleep." 2 staff members appeared instantly, guiding him back into his seat. "You're not in trouble," one of them said soothingly. "You're just progressing faster than expected." The phrase chilled me. I leaned toward the woman beside me. "What happens to them?" I whispered, nodding toward the blinking wristbands. She didn't look at me. "They stop waking up here." The screen went dark. The technician turned to face us. "You're all doing very well," she said. "Your cooperation helps keep Halcyon safe." "Safe from what?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes found mine instantly. "From it," she said, "from needing a body." That night I dreamed again. But this time I wasn't in the hallway. I was standing at the end of it. A door had appeared. It was open. and something on the other side was waiting patiently for me to step through. I stopped trying to avoid sleep after that. Not because I wanted to comply, but because I learned the truth. Sleep wasn't optional in Halcyon. It was enforced. The wristband no longer waited for me to drift off. Around 10:58 p.m. each night, it warmed against my skin, releasing a faint vibration that slowed my breathing. By 11:00, my limbs felt heavy. By 11:03, my thoughts blurred, as if someone were gently turning down the volume on my consciousness. I fought it once. I paced my house, bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, slammed my hands into cold water. None of it mattered. My body gave in anyway, folding inward like it had been waiting for permission. I dreamed the hallway again. Only now it was brighter. The walls were no longer blank. They were covered in impressions, hands pressed into the surface from the other side, faces pushing through like something trapped under ice. And the door at the end was wider. Closer. When I woke, my wristband blinked amber. At the sleep center, no one pretended anymore. They showed us archived footage, early experiments, the first dreamers, people who described the same space decades apart, long before Halcyon was built. The mind is a threshold, the director explained, standing before the screen. Most of the time it stays closed, but sleep loosens it. They didn't build Halcyon to monitor dreams. They built it to condition dreamers. To teach people how to approach the doorway without crossing it, to normalize the presence on the other side, to keep it fed with attention without giving it permission. Escalated subjects, the director continued, are those who can no longer maintain the boundary. Someone asked the question we were all thinking. What happens to them? They're reassigned, he said. That night the door in my dream spoke. Not in words, in recognition. I understood then what Halcyon was preparing for. The dreams were getting stronger everywhere, not just here, not just now, the T. Hing behind the door was pushing harder, searching for minds that could hold it, shape it, wear it. Halcyon wasn't a prison. It was a training ground. The escalated weren't being punished. They were being chosen. I left Halcyon 3 days later. They didn't stop me. They never do. Because now I know what they know. The door is already open. Sleep just teaches you how to walk through it calmly. Story 5: The town where silence was a crime. The town council met every evening at 6. Not because they had business to discuss, but because everyone needed to be seen. I learned that on my first day in Briar's Hollow, standing in the cramped town hall with 24 strangers, all of us clutching identical notebooks. The walls were lined with microphones, old ones scratched, some with duct tape holding the cords together. A man at the front cleared his throat. Confession begins now, he said. One by one, people stood and spoke. Not sins, not crimes, not secrets you'd expect. Small things. I felt jealous of my sister today. I thought about leaving town again. I lied when I said I was fine. Each confession was written down by someone else, cross-checked, filed. When it was my turn, the room felt smaller. I don't understand, I said. Is this mandatory? Every head turned toward me. The man at the front smiled. Silence is. I laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. It was. That night, a speaker mounted to the streetlight outside my rented room crackled to life at midnight. Resident 312, a voice announced calmly, "You failed to submit a complete confession." The pause. "Please correct this tomorrow." The next morning, I noticed the marks. Small chalk symbols drawn near door frames. Some houses had many, others had none. My door had one. I asked my neighbor about it. He glanced around before answering. "They're listening," he whispered, "not to what you say, to what you don't." Every day the confessions grew longer, more detailed. People spoke about dreams, doubts, impulses they'd never acted on. The notebooks filled quickly. One woman broke down, sobbing halfway through hers. That night her house went quiet. Too quiet. The next morning her notebook sat on the council table, open, pages blank. "I tried to lie in my confession. Just enough to be safe." The man writing paused, looked up at me. "That's not true," he said gently. "How do you know?" I snapped. He tapped the microphone. "Because you hesitated." That was when I realized the truth. The town didn't want honesty. It wanted constant disclosure. To keep people talking, draining, emptying themselves. Because whatever lived beneath Briar's Hollow didn't feed on lies. It fed on what people were too afraid to say. That night I stopped talking. Completely. I covered my mouth when I slept. The chalk symbol on my door multiplied. And something began knocking from inside the walls, waiting for me to confess out loud. I lasted 3 days without speaking. Not 3 days of quiet, 3 days of swallowing words until my throat burned, of writing notes instead of answering questions, of nodding and shaking my head like a child who hadn't learned how to talk yet. The town noticed immediately. The microphones followed me. They weren't fixed in place anymore. New ones appeared overnight on lampposts near park benches tucked into the corners of storefronts. Little red lights blinked when I passed, tracking, waiting. At the evening council meeting, my chair was empty. They saved it anyway. Resident 312 has chosen silence, the man at the front announced calmly. "We'll allow a grace period." A murmur rippled through the room, not sympathy, anticipation. That night the knocking inside the walls grew louder. Not random, rhythmic. Like someone practicing speech. I pressed my ear to the plaster and felt breath on the other side. Warm, damp, close enough that the wall vibrated with it. "Say something," a voice whispered, not aloud, but directly into the space behind my thoughts. I bit my lip until it bled. On the 4th day, they came to escort me. 2 council members, smiling, polite. "Just a wellness check," one said, gesturing toward the door. "We're concerned about your participation." They led me beneath the town hall, down a narrow staircase I hadn't known existed. The air grew colder with every step. The sound of voices echoed from below, not speaking, but murmuring, overlapping, constant. The room at the bottom was filled with notebooks. Thousands of them. Stacked floor to ceiling, every confession ever spoken in Briar's Hollow, preserved in ink and paper. At the center of the room was a pit. And inside the pit, something listened. I couldn't see it clearly. The shape shifted, forming and unforming like smoke trapped underwater, but I could hear it. Every confession ever made was being whispered back into it, played on a loop, jealousy, guilt, fear, desire, regret. Human noise. It needs voices, the councilman said softly. Truth gives it form, silence starves it. What? Then why punish silence? I croaked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The thing in the pit shuddered. The councilman smiled sadly, because silence makes it angry. The moment I spoke, the notebooks around us trembled, pages flipped on their own. The murmuring grew louder, eager. I realized then what Briar's Hollow really was. Not a town, a throat, a place built to keep something talking so it wouldn't scream. They let me go that night. By morning my door was clean, no chalk marks, no microphones nearby. I left without telling anyone. Now I choose my words carefully. I don't confess. I don't overshare. And when I feel the urge to say something just to fill the quiet, I stop. Because somewhere beneath a town that still doesn't sleep, something is listening. And it's learned my voice. Story 6, the town that held a funeral every day. The funeral was already underway when I arrived. That should have been my first warning, walking into a town and finding everyone dressed in black before I'd even unpacked my bags. Men in dark coats, women with veils pulled low, children standing quietly, hands folded like they'd practiced this their whole lives. A bell tolled somewhere in the distance. Once, slow, final. I'd come to Ashford on a temporary contract, same as the others. Short-term work, census cleanup, 3 weeks, maybe 4. The realtor who handed me the keys to my rental house hadn't mentioned the funerals, just smiled and said, "You'll know where to be at noon." At exactly 12 o'clock, the bell rang again. The procession moved as one. No one spoke. They walked down the main road toward a small white chapel at the center of town. The building looked too clean, too well-maintained, like it was used far more often than it should have been. Inside, a closed casket rested at the front. No flowers, no photos, no name. The priest stepped forward. "We are gathered," he said evenly, "to remember what was lost." That was it. No eulogy, no story, no identity. The casket was carried out back and lowered into the ground behind the chapel. A fresh mound of dirt sat beside dozens of others, lined up in perfect rows, each grave marked only by a date. Today's date. I leaned toward the man beside me and whispered, "Who was it?" He didn't look at me. We don't ask that. After the burial, everyone dispersed, went back to work, back to routine, as if nothing unusual had happened. At dinner that night, I asked my landlord about it. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just how Ashford does things." "How many people die here?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "Not many, maybe one every few months." My fork paused midair. Then why a funeral every day? Her smile faltered. "You'll understand soon," she said. The next day at noon, the bell rang again. Another casket, another grave. Same date. I started paying attention to the faces in the crowd. They weren't grieving. They were relieved. On the third day, I noticed something else. The number of graves hadn't increased. They were reusing them. Opening the same ones, lowering the casket, closing them again. As if burying the same person over and over. On the fourth day, I realized what truly terrified me. I recognized the shoes beneath the edge of the casket. They were mine. I didn't say anything when I saw the shoes. I couldn't. My mouth went dry, tongue stuck to the roof like it had forgotten how to move. I stood there, staring at the scuffed leather toe peeking out beneath the white cloth, telling myself it was coincidence. Same brand, same color, common shoes. Except I hadn't seen anyone else in Ashford wearing them. The bell rang again, sharp and close, snapping me back into the moment. The casket was lowered, dirt was shoveled in. The crowd bowed their heads. And then, just like always, they turned and walked away. No one noticed me backing up slowly. No one tried to stop me when I left the chapel grounds and went straight home. I didn't go to work that afternoon. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my shoes by the door. The left one had a faint scratch near the laces. I remembered exactly when it happened, bumping into a metal stair rail during my first week here. The shoe in the casket had the same scratch. At 11:58 the next morning, there was a knock at my door. My landlord stood outside, dressed in black. "You weren't at the funeral yesterday," she said gently. "I was," I replied. "I just left early." Her eyes searched my face. "Don't do that again." "What happens if I do?" I asked. She sighed like a teacher tired of repeating herself. "Then you don't get buried properly." I followed her to the chapel that day. At noon, the bell rang. The casket was open. I almost threw up. Inside was a man who looked exactly like me. Same face, same haircut, same scar on the chin I'd gotten as a kid. His eyes were closed, expression peaceful, too peaceful. "He was found this morning," the priest said calmly. "Didn't attend yesterday's service." I staggered back. "That's not possible." "It is here," my landlord said. "The funeral isn't for who dies, it's for who stays." I didn't understand. She explained as the dirt was shoveled over my own face. Ashford sits on a thin place, a boundary where death doesn't quite finish the job. When someone is meant to die, something of them lingers unfinished, restless. If left alone, it crawls back, wears the body again, walks the streets at night. The funerals keep it buried. Every day, the town gathers to remind the dead they are dead. "Attendance matters," she said. "Being seen matters. It tells the ground who belongs in it." "What happens if you miss?" I whispered. She looked at the fresh grave. "Then the wrong version of you stays." That night I dreamed of the man in the casket. He was standing at the foot of my bed, smiling. "You don't have to go tomorrow," he said. "I can handle it." When I woke up, my alarm clock read 12:07 p.m. The bell was ringing, and I was already late. I ran. Shoes half-laced, jacket forgotten, lungs burning as I tore down the street toward the chapel. The bell's echo followed me, each toll hammering into my skull like a countdown I couldn't stop. When I reached the doors, they were already closed. Black paint fresh, as if they'd been waiting for this moment. I pounded on them anyway. "I'm here," I shouted. "I'm here, open the door." The doors opened. Not wide, just enough. Inside, the service was already underway. The casket sat open at the front. Empty. The priest turned to face me. His eyes moved over my face slowly, assessing, like a customs agent deciding whether to wave someone through. "You're late," he said. "I'm alive," I replied. "That has to count for something." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, not fear, not anger. "Evaluation." My landlord stepped forward. "Two versions can't stay," she said softly. "That's the rule." I swallowed. "Where is he?" The priest gestured behind the chapel. We walked past the graves deeper than I'd ever gone. The rows thinned, the dirt looked older, untouched. That's where I saw him. Standing upright beside an open grave, brushing dirt from his sleeves like he'd just climbed out of it. He looked healthier than I felt, calmer, rested. You made it, he said pleasantly. I wasn't sure you would. What are you? I demanded. He smiled. I'm the version that belongs here. The priest cleared his throat. The town can only anchor one of you, the one who attends, the one who accepts. I looked at the open grave, at the dirt waiting. What happens to the other? I asked. No one answered. My other self stepped closer. You don't want this, he said. The bell, the funerals, the watching, let me stay, I'll do it right. And me, I whispered. He hesitated. That's not my problem. That was when I understood. Ashford didn't decide who lived. It decided who fit. I took a step back. Then another. I don't belong here, I said, but you do. The priest nodded, a wise choice. The other me frowned, wait. I turned and walked away. Behind me, the bell rang one final time. When I reached the edge of town, the road felt different, lighter, like something had let go. I never looked back. Later, I checked the obituaries out of curiosity. There was one entry for Ashford. No name, just a date, and beneath it, a line that chilled me more than anything else. Story 7, the town that erased people without killing them. I didn't realize I was disappearing until no one remembered how long I'd been there. Eldridge was the kind of town people passed through without noticing. One main road, a handful of shops, houses set back far enough that you never felt invited. I arrived on a Monday afternoon and rented a room above a closed-down pharmacy. The landlord barely looked at me when I signed the papers. How long you staying? He asked. Not sure, I said. A few weeks, maybe. He nodded. That's usually how it starts. I assumed he meant short-term rentals. The first sign something was wrong came on Thursday. I went into a diner I'd eaten at every morning since I arrived. Same booth, same waitress, same coffee burnt, no refills unless you asked twice. When I sat down, the waitress stopped short. Can I help you? She asked. Yes, I said slowly. Coffee, black. She frowned. You new in town? I laughed. No, I've been here all week. Her expression didn't change. She wrote nothing down. The coffee never came. At the hardware store, the clerk asked for my name again, even though he'd asked it 3 days earlier. At the post office, my mail sat unclaimed because, according to their records, no one lived in my unit. By Friday, people started looking through me. Not ignoring me, not avoiding me. Forgetting me mid-conversation. I would speak and they'd blink like they'd lost their place. One man apologized to empty air after bumping into me. He looked confused when I said it was fine. That night I found a flyer taped to my door. Residency verification required. It lists dia, time and place, Saturday 10 a.m., town hall basement. I went early. The basement was full of filing cabinets, old ones, metal, each drawer labeled with names, dates, and addresses. Some labels were crossed out, others were half scratched away, like someone had started erasing them and stopped. A woman sat at a folding table, sorting through photographs. She didn't look surprised to see me. You're fading fast, she said. What does that mean? I asked. She slid a photo toward me. It showed a street corner I recognized, me standing on it, clear as day. Then she slid another. Same corner. I wasn't in it. People don't vanish here, she said. They're unrecorded. I felt cold. How do I stop it? She met my eyes. Prove you existed. The woman's name was Ruth. At least that's what she told me. I had no way to verify it, and she seemed to find that amusing in a tired, resigned sort of way. She gestured for me to sit, then tapped the stack of photographs beside her. Eldridge runs on records, she said, not laws, not enforcement, paper, memory, proof. I sat slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, I might blur, so if there's proof, I stay. She tilted her head. If there's enough proof, and if it's connected to other people. She opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were folders, thousands of them, some thick, some thin, many completely empty, labels peeled halfway off. Everyone who comes through gets a file, she explained. Bills, receipts, photos, witnesses. The town tracks you automatically at first, but once you stop making impressions, it stops trying. What counts as an impression? Impact, she said, change, being remembered without trying. I thought about my week in Eldridge. Quiet mornings, polite nods, no arguments, no friendships. I'd done everything I could to stay unnoticed. That's bad, isn't it? I asked. Ruth smiled sadly. It's the worst thing you can do here. She slid another folder toward me. My name was written on the tab. Inside were 2 receipts, a rental agreement, a grainy security still from the pharmacy camera showing me unlocking the door. That was it. You have maybe a day, she said, 2 if you're lucky. I ran. Not out of town through it. I spoke to people, forced conversations, asked names, told stories, introduced myself over and over, louder each time. I knocked on doors and apologized for things I hadn't done just to be remembered for something. Most people smiled politely. Some looked confused. A few looked afraid. By evening, my reflection started lagging in store windows, just a fraction of a second behind, enough to notice. At the diner, I spilled coffee on purpose, burned my hand. The waitress yelped, rushed over, wrapped it in a towel. For a moment, she really saw me. I wrote my name on the wall of the pharmacy apartment, carved it into the wood under the bed, left fingerprints everywhere. Ruth found me near sunset. It's not working, I said. My voice sounded thin, distant, like it had already traveled too far. She nodded. You're running out of anchors. What happens when the file's empty? She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, you keep walking, but no one moves around you anymore. That night, I went back to the basement. I opened cabinets until I found the oldest files, names crossed out completely, no photos, no paper, nothing. But some of the drawers still felt warm. I understood then. People didn't die here. They were forgotten forward. I went home and packed everything I owned into one bag, photos, IDs, notes, anything with my name on it. I left copies everywhere under doors, in mailboxes, on windshields. At midnight, I felt something tear. Not pain, separation. Like the town finally letting go. I walked until the road turned into highway, until my phone regained signal. I checked my messages. Nothing. No history, no contacts, no photos. Just one note saved in my drafts, written in my handwriting. If you're reading this, you made it out. Don't go back. And don't stay anywhere too quiet. I thought leaving Eldridge would fix it. That once I crossed far enough beyond the town limits, past the unmarked sign, past the stretch of road where my phone came back to life, I'd start to feel solid again, anchored, like memory would rush back in to fill the gaps. Instead, it got quieter. Not around me, about me. At the motel where I stopped that night, the clerk asked for my ID. I handed it over, watching his eyes track the card carefully. He typed something into the computer, frowned, and tried again. System S being weird, he muttered. What's your last name again? I told him. He nodded, typed, paused. Then looked up, you sure? I felt that tearing sensation again, subtle, internal, like a thread being pulled loose. The room key worked, the lights worked, the TV worked. But the channel guide showed no history, no recommendations, no continue watching. As if the room had never had a guest before. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried tea. Oh, piece everything together. Ridgeway, the lights, the thing that learned voices, Greymark and the siren that trained people not to listen, Halcyon conditioning dreamers to hold a door shut, Briar's Hollow feeding something with confession so it wouldn't scream, Ashford burying the wrong versions of the dead, Eldridge erasing people who left no imprint behind. Different towns, same purpose, containment. Every place I'd passed through wasn't haunted. They were interfaces, pressure valves, human systems designed slowly, imperfectly, to manage something too large, too abstract, too patient to fight directly. The siren didn't call to kill. The thing in Ridgeway didn't hunt to eat. The presence in dreams didn't want bodies. They all wanted the same thing. Continuity. Humans who stayed put, humans who followed rules, humans who remembered, confessed, slept, buried, listened, lit the dark. Humans who anchored reality. Eldridge was different because it dealt with failure. With people like me. People who slipped through cracks without leaving marks. That's when I noticed something on the motel TV. A local news segment played silently, no audio, just captions scrolling at the bottom. Small TOWNS report increased transient anomalies. Officials cite stress, urban legends. Behind the text, images flashed. A diner with its lights locked on at night. A coastal road lined with warning sirens. A white chapel surrounded by fresh dirt. All places I recognized. The camera cut to a final image. A blurred photo of a man standing at the edge of a crowd. Me, or what was left of me. The caption beneath it read, "Unidentified individual, presence unconfirmed." My phone buzzed. A new note appeared in my drafts, one I hadn't written. You can still be useful. Just stay somewhere. Anywhere. I deleted it. Immediately, the lights in the room flickered. I understood the last rule then, the one no town ever wrote down. You don't survive by escaping. You survive by choosing where to be remembered. I left the motel before dawn. I talk to people now, loudly, too much. I make mistakes on purpose. I argue, I help, I leave traces, receipts, photos, messages, proof that I existed somewhere long enough to matter. Because I know what happens if I ever stop. If I ever become quiet enough, forgettable enough, I won't die. I'll just become another empty space a town has to build around. And one day, someone passing through will feel it. That pressure, that absence. And they'll follow the rules without ever knowing why.